A hush fell over the grand hollow of the Supreme Forest Court as Judge Bartholomew Badger ascended the moss-covered stump that served as the bench. The colossal Badger adjusted his tiny wooden spectacles and banged a gavel fashioned from a pine cone. Order! By authority of root and branch, this court convenes to hear the Forest v. Squeaky Macacorn, case number 98817. Charges: grand nut laundering, conspiracy to conceal acorns in offshore hollows, and excessive chatter during quiet hours. The gallery, packed with critters from red robins to militant ants, let out a collective gasp. Partly from shock and partly because someone had sneaked in fermented huckleberries. At the defense table stood Chester Chitterley, Chipmunk attorney at law, wearing a pinstripe walnut shell that had been repurposed into a three-piece suit. He polished his sunflower seed cufflinks and flashed a confident grin at his client. Squeaky Macacorn, a gray squirrel notorious for hoarding, clutched his bushy tail like a comfort blanket. His whiskers twitched with anxiety and, if one listened closely, one could hear a soft eek 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 that translated loosely to "Oh sap, I'm doomed." Across the aisle, the prosecution radiated gravitas. Penelope O'Al, middle initial for Objection, hooted softly while arranging her scrolls. Rumor claimed she never lost a case. Penelope adjusted her velvet barrister's collar, spread her impressive wings, and glared at Chester through eyes as round as two polished chestnuts. "Prepare yourself, rodent," those eyes seemed to say. Chester merely winked, revealing a poppy seed lodged between his incisors. Judge Badger cleared his throat. "Prosecution, your opening statement." Penelope took flight, swooping low enough that a field mouse screamed, "Air raid!" before diving for cover. Settling on a branch podium, she began, "Fellow denizens, this is no small acorn theft. This is laundering of the highest order. Over the last 2 autumns, Mr. Macacorn received an influx of over 10,000 unshelled acorns." She whipped out a leaf ledger stamped Reese CIPPs, yet declared only 12 to the annual forest treasury. He then buried the rest under assumed burrows registered to chipmunks, voles, and, rather disturbingly, a dead log. Our witnesses will prove he scrubbed the identity of each nut, making them indistinguishable from legally gathered ones. If we do not act, we will descend into chaotic caching. A chorus of horrified squeaks rippled through the audience. Somewhere in row 3, a young squirrel fainted onto a hedgehog who, being spiny, was an uncooperative pillow. Judge Badger rapped the gavel. "Order," I said. Penelope ended with a flourish. "The forest's future, Your Honor, depends on preventing corruption in our most sacred economy, the autumnal stash. We ask for full forfeiture and lifetime ban from nut-gathering quotas." Chester hopped onto a stack of legal tomes to reach podium height. "Your Honor, colleagues, and woodland freeloaders who just wandered in for the drama," he began, "the prosecution wants you to believe my client is a mastermind of an underground nut cartel, but the truth is simpler. He's a victim of hype, of faulty math, and of the natural urge to bury anything that isn't nailed down. We will show that the so-called laundering operation is nothing more than innocent overenthusiasm, typical for a squirrel with mild statistics anxiety." He clasped his paws earnestly. "Today you will hear from expert witnesses, examine dirt samples, and possibly taste an acorn muffin if Bailiff Raccoon hasn't eaten them all. When the leaf settles, you will find my client not just innocent, but adorably misunderstood." A smattering of titters issued from the gallery, even Judge Badger's whiskers twitched. "Proceed," the judge grumbled. First witness for prosecution: Reginald Redhead, a woodpecker and certified public beakpocket. Oh, he strutted to the stand, tapped the wooden railing 3 times, pure habit, and swore on the great oak to tell the peck, the whole peck, and nothing but the peck. Penelope flared a wing. "Mr. Redhead, in reviewing Macacorn Holdings, what did you discover?" Reginald pulled out charts carved on birch bark. "Anomalies. The average squirrel buries 3,146 acorns per autumn, give or take 2 standard squeaks. Macacorn stash? 10,000 plus. Statistically impossible unless he had a team or illicit suppliers." He pecked decisively at the bark for emphasis, sending splinters onto a beaver juror who murmured, "Watch the lumber, pal." Penelope cooed triumphantly. Chester rose for cross-examination. Mr. Redhead, would you agree squirrels sometimes forget where they put nuts? Of course. Short memory span. It's in my report. Squirrel forgetfulness quotient, or SFQ. Chester paced theatrically. And if one forgets half one's nuts, one might gather twice as many to compensate, yes? I suppose, Reginald admitted warily. Chester pounced. Therefore, Megacorn stash is not criminal, it's precautionary. Had your study included SFQ adjustments, you'd see his numbers fall neatly within 1 jitter of normal. He slapped the chart so hard a chunk of bark fell off. The beaver juror discreetly pocketed it for future dam repairs. The woodpecker blinked. Speculative statistics. But Judge Badger overruled, amused by the phrase, 1 jitter of normal. Reginald left the stand vibrating with righteous indignation. Penelope's next witness waddled forward. Detective Mallory Mink from the River Patrol, black trench coat soaked from perpetual dampness. She produced sealed evidence bags containing acorns painted with tiny smiley faces. We raided a hollow registered to a gerbil alias Jerry Chew, Mallory testified. Inside, 500 acorns marked with those faces, the signature of the Nutwash Syndicate. We traced claw prints back to Macacorn. Gasps again. Chester scratched his ear contemplatively. Detective Mink, do you recognize this? He held up an acorn with a frowning face. Of course, she said. Standard street reaction to a bad wash? Exactly. Chester tossed it to a possum juror, who promptly fainted, though possums faint at anything. Now, could McAcorn's prints appear in that hollow simply because he, like every squirrel, explores random trees during romp hour? Mallory hesitated. Possible, but unlikely. Chester leaned in. And the signature smiley face, could it be accidental discoloration caused by sap drips? Perhaps yours truly sees 2 eyes and a grin, but another sees a cloud and 2 pine needles? The mink squinted at the acorn. I suppose perception varies. Chester thanked her and sat. Penelope's feathers fluffed in frustration. She shifted tactics, calling, Surprise witness, Blue Jay, Bluemouth Jenkins, known gossip monk. He swaggered up, wearing a tiny fedora. Yeah, I saw Squeaky meeting shady chipmunks by the creek, swapping nuts for polished pebbles, called it a rinse cycle. I heard it myself. Under cross-examination, Chester asked, Bluemouth, how good are you at identifying chipmunks? There are, after all, over a dozen of us in stylish pinstripes. Bluemouth scratched his head. You all look alike. Fast, stripy, adorable. Aha! Chester spun to the jury. Mistaken identity. Could have been any chipmunk, maybe even me, though I've never met a polished pebble I didn't try to floss with. The gallery chuckled. The judge masked a grin behind his gavel handle. Penelope attempted salvage. Witness, how loud was Squeaky when he said, rinse cycle? Bluemouth puffed. Real loud. Squeaky, squeak, squeakily. Chester objected. Onomatopoeic defamation. The judge, unsure what that meant but liking the sound, sustained. Prosecution rested their case, wings drooping. Judge Badger turned to Chester. Defense? Chester smoothed his whiskers. The defense calls its first and only witness, the defendant. Squeaky shuffled to the stand, tail frizzing like static lightning. After swearing on a crunchy oak leaf, an oath he nearly ate, Chester began gently. Squeaky, in your own squeaks, explain your autumn routine. Squeaky inhaled. Well, Your Honor, I wake up, chatter affirmations. You got this, buddy. Then gather acorns. I get excited, see another nut. Forget the first one, panic, gather 2 more, forget both, overcorrect. Next thing you know, boom, mountain of nuts. The jury nodded sympathetically. Even Penelope scribbled, relatable. Chester continued, Did you ever intentionally disguise acorns? Squeaky's eyes widened. Disguised? Why would I hide something already buried? Excellent point, Chester said. Who taught you to bury nuts? My mom, Squeaky replied proudly. She said, if you dig it, you keep it, just remember where. I never remember where. Laughter spurted through the courtroom like sap. Judge Badger cleared his throat, but his eyes crinkled. Chester leaned closer. Tell the court about your ledger. Squeaky pulled out a grubby notebook labeled Nuts I Might Possibly Own. Inside, numbers scrawled, crossed out, and replaced with drawings of stick figure squirrels dancing. I tried record keeping, he said sheepishly, but math is hard. The notebook was passed to jurors. A mole on the panel adjusted his spectacles and whispered, "This is either evidence of innocence or insanity." Chester closed. "No further questions." Penelope rose, ready to pounce. "Mr. Macacorn, can you explain this smiley face acorns?" Squeaky shrugged. "Happy accidents? Sometimes sap drips, sometimes I nibble while whistling, makes patterns." Penelope said, unconvinced. She tried another angle. "Isn't it true you owe a beaver cooperative 3 dozen premium acorns for dam loan interest?" Squeaky's tail drooped. "Yes." "And that you gathered extra nuts to pay them?" "Also yes," he admitted. "Aha! Motive," Penelope hooted triumphantly. Mr. objected. "Working extra to pay debts is not laundering. It's called employment, albeit unpaid, which is confusing economics but perfectly legal." Judge Badger, secretly still paying off a hedgehog for dental work, nodded sympathetically. "Sustained." The defense called its last witness, Dr. Myrtle Moss, behavioral ecologist and turtle. She took forever reaching the stand. Jurors aged visibly, but once there, her voice rang clear. Squirrels partake in scatter hoarding. High scatterers accumulate far more nuts than they consume, benefiting forest regeneration. Macacorn's numbers, while high, fall within upper scatter percentile. Chester asked, "Is nut laundering a recognized term in animal behavior?" Dr. Moss chuckled. "Only in tabloid leaves. In science we call that cash alteration, and it is natural, not criminal." Penelope tried a last jab. "But doctor, could excessive caching destabilize nut markets?" Myrtle smirked slowly. "If you believe in markets among creatures that literally forget their assets, sure." The jury laughed. Even Penelope's stern face cracked. With witnesses exhausted, Judge Badger requested closing arguments. Penelope's feathers bristled with renewed vigor. "Honorable creatures, today we heard excuses, forgetfulness, sap patterns, fuzzy math. But the law protects our communal resources. If one squirrel piles mountains while others starve, we face inequality the likes of which only raccoons enjoy. This is not about innocence. It's about responsibility." Several squirrels glanced at their own bellies guiltily. Raccoons shrugged, accepting their reputation. Chester approached the jury box, paws clasped behind his back. "Friends, we all hoard something. Blue jays hoard shiny objects. Badgers hoard snacks under the bench. Sorry, Your Honor. But hoarding is not laundering. No shell was stripped of identity. No acorn scrubbed through a fungus front. My client didn't conceal wealth. He misplaced it. He is guilty only of optimism and a profound lack of direction. He produced a single golden acorn. This, he said, was found 2 days ago, sprouting into a sapling, probably one of Squeaky's lost nuts. Because of scatter hoarders like him, we enjoy new oaks each year. He isn't siphoning the forest, he's planting it." Chester placed the acorn gently on the rail, where it gleamed in the dappled sunlight filtering through the court's leafy roof. A stillness settled. Judge Badger instructed the jury to retire to the stump of deliberation. 12 critters shuffled out. Minutes stretched. A crow cawed the Jeopardy theme. Penelope and Chester exchanged wary glances. Squeaky gnawed a stress twig down to mulch. At last the jury returned. A stoic tortoise, 4-person redder of the judge, and the fastest among turtles stood. "We find the defendant," dramatic pause long enough for a squirrel year's worth of nut gathering, "not guilty on all counts." An eruption of cheers. Squeaky squealed, hugging Chester so hard acorns tumbled from beneath his vest. Judge Badger banged the pinecone gavel. "Order! As for overgathering, I mandate Macacorn conduct community service, guiding the annual seedling day for young saplings. Case dismissed." He winked at Dr. Moss, who blushed behind her shell. Penelope hooted a grudging compliment to Chester. "Good lawyering, Chip." "Good hookin' counsel," he replied. Outside the Grand Hollow, pressed squirrels brandished acorn microphones. "Squeaky, How will you celebrate? Squeaky beamed. I'm going to dig responsibly and maybe invest in diversified pinecone futures, laughter rippled. Chester addressed reporters. This verdict proves the law distinguishes between malicious laundering and charming incompetence. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment with a sunflower seed martini. As the crowd dispersed, Penelope approached Chester, offering a wing. Truce? Until next fall, he agreed, shaking. High above, leaves whispered in the breeze, already gossiping about the next scandal rumors of a raccoon pyramid scheme involving shiny bottle caps. But for now, balance had been restored, and somewhere beneath the forest floor, a forgotten acorn cracked open, unfurling a tiny root destined to become the next mighty oak, thanks, in no small part, to a scatterbrained squirrel and his fast-talking chipmunk lawyer,